chat with her over the next hour as well. So we've got some really good topics to dive into today. But before I start, I do want to do a really quick acknowledgement of country, just to say that the Dream Collective acknowledges the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as Australia's First People and the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, create and work. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders and leaders, emerging, past, emerging and present. And of course, because we are here on Zoom, what it means is that I'd love to extend that out to any of you that are listening from other countries here as well. And I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which you are at. So if you are here, I'd love to also see where you are joining us from. So please pop it into the chat. I'd love to see where everyone is. I am here in Melbourne, and I believe Jordy's here in Melbourne as well. So it is also very, very cold. So I'm just also hanging out to hear about the better weather. But anyway, as a quick introduction, I'd love to introduce myself and Jordy. My name is Sugandha. I am a senior D&I consultant with the Dream Collective. And, you know, part of my role is to run amazing events like this for SheReturns. And I'm joined here this morning with Jordy Ughetti, who is the head of customer experience at Cenitex. Before we go in, I'd love to just maybe share a little bit about what SheReturns is. It is a platform, it is a community, it is a program to support women who've had a career break and who are thinking about returning to work, back into paid employment, whatever that looks like for you. And we're partnering with a number of organizations who are also looking for women who are looking to come back into paid employment. And Cenitex is one of our amazing partners as well too. So Cenitex is an IT organization that supports the Vic government. But I will, you know, once we get to Jordy, I'm going to let her explain a little bit about, you know, who she is, what she does at Cenitex, and a bit more about the organization there as well. So for those who are joining us as well, I'd also love for you to join us on the SheReturns platform, and we'll pop a link into the chat now and also after the webinar as well for you to join. And then you can actually see some of the roles that are available at Cenitex that are looking for women who are looking to return into paid employment too. So please do check that out as well. So before we get started, I'd love to just pass it over to Jordy to really introduce herself. I know for those who are in SheReturns, you can see her bio there as well. So I'm going to let you read that. But, you know, I always think that it's amazing to hear it from the person's own words. And I'd love to hear from you, Jordy, a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what you do at Cenitex, and then we'll get into it.
Great. All right, let's do this. Good morning, everybody, and hello from the Wurundjeri land on which I live and work. It's great to be here. So my story starts as the fact that I'm a human. Before my role as Cenitex employee or mum or wife or daughter or friend or even amateur, at times very awkward runner, I'm a human. And actually, I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but that kind of notion or idea really colours or stains the work I do in customer experience at Cenitex as well. And so what I mean by that, in that I'm a human, is that my value isn't defined by any of the roles that I do, and I genuinely believe that. So my value is not defined by me being a mum or me being a wife or me being a Cenitex employee. In fact, my value is really how I measure my own value is how I'm feeling in myself, particularly when I go to bed at night, and what are the choices that I'm making during the day, and how am I living according to my own values. That's what I'm more interested in. And so in terms of, because we're here to talk about returning to work, I've done that in so many different ways in my life. I've returned to work twice after having children. My son's 3 and my daughter's 2. So it's a wonderful time in my home. In fact, if you look a bit closely, you might be able to see the beautiful bags under my eyes. And Sig, thank you for telling me there's a fancy filter on Zoom where you can kind of Photoshop yourself so you look a little more awake.
Secret hack.
Right. But I've also returned to work in other ways too. I've had a redundancy in a past life. I've left work from burnout by choice and returned from that. I've also returned after a miscarriage. And as you can see, the responses I'm starting to give are the more human experiences, the stuff that we don't always talk about, particularly miscarriage. I've also returned from traveling the world. I took 12 months off and lived in Cambodia and traveled to Iran and Iraq and Syria and Palestine and all these incredible places. Timbuktu, I didn't even know that Timbuktu even existed, but it is, it's a place near the Sahara Desert. But my point is I've returned in lots of different ways. And, you know, there's a very human experience that happens in that. In terms of the professional stuff, I'm head of customer experience here at Cenitex, which is basically just a fancy way of saying I'm really in the business of people. I'm helping our organisation reconnect with its heart, and in doing so, reconnect with the people that are in this organisation doing really great work in the IT space, and how we provide more value and have more meaningful exchange between our organisation and the people that we serve, which are the employees in Victorian government. And I'm sure we'll talk about that some more in a moment.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Jordy. And there's just so much there that I already just want to ask you like a million questions about. And so what I will also do is just a reminder for those that are here today as well, please, you feel free to use the chat to ask questions or comment on any of the things that myself or Jordy are speaking about. And if there is a particular question that you would like to ask Jordy, we do have the Q&A function down below, and I'll be keeping an eye on those questions, and I'll open it up to you all as well. But I might want to actually just take it back a little bit, because you've mentioned, and I love the way that you have said that you're a human first, and I think that is so important for us to remember as we kind of navigate life, really. And as we think about how we evolve as human beings through so many different experiences and situations and challenges. And you mentioned a whole heap of different reasons for why you took time off from, you know, the workplace as well. And I can relate to some of them, particularly around the burnout reason. And so I would love to just maybe hear from you then, and is out of all of the reasons that you did take time off from work, which one out of them, I guess, was the hardest for you to come back to work, to kind of make that shift from the reason you left to come back to work as well?
Okay. I'll answer that in a moment. I'm just going to pause, because the other thing that I really want to say is how wonderful that we can all be on a call talking about this. There's something it almost feels a bit indulgent that we get to talk about these sorts of topics on work time and get paid for it. And that's great. That's a wonderful thing. And whilst it feels a bit indulgent, we should be doing it more often. So, shout out to everyone on the call today and those who might listen in the future, and certainly shout out to the Dream Collective and Cenitex, because that's a cool thing, the fact that businesses are recognising that, and there are enough humans on this call that actually want to be part of that conversation ongoing. I think that's cool. Okay, so in terms of return, I should also say none of this is scripted or rehearsed. So I actually didn't know that Sig was going to ask me that question. And so now I'm thinking and speaking at the same time. Sometimes I'm good at that, sometimes I'm not. We'll see how it goes. Okay. So look, I would say, and I can probably count on two hands how many times I've both left work and returned to work. I would say that they all are rich in challenges and opportunities in different ways. So rather than maybe speaking to one specific one, I can tell you some of the things the themes that have kind of come through those, because there's a lot of overwhelm that happens with returning to work or starting a new job or starting a promotion as well. I mean, I think a lot of people are, I'm working with several people now who are kind of jumping into new roles, and I think that has a thread in it too. The first is, and again, I can only speak to my experience as a human. I've talked about the overwhelm, and I think part of that is triggered by, are you good enough? You know, can you really do this? And we know statistically, when you see the data, that women play have a greater we're more likely to have that sort of self-doubt. Having said that, men are not excluded. So, you know, can I do this? Am I good enough? I have that less now. I'm 40 now. I've lived a pretty good and chaotic life, and I'm much more comfortable with knowing my worth and knowing that I can do it. And if I can't, that's okay. There's this cool thing called Google, and you can just Google it. So, you know, that's one thing. And Google, amazing. Like, I Google sometimes how to parent, and it's awesome. Yeah, good old Dr. Google. And actually, I was talking to a colleague who happens to be male the other day, who's just returned to work after a period of time off, and we were talking about just technology, the fact that when you're starting a new job, or you've been on holidays for a while, or you're returning after a period, that technology changes so much. And I must have said to him, you know, just ping me on whatever, on Microsoft Teams, which is our version of Zoom at work. And we were laughing because he was like, I actually didn't know what that was. I had to Google what ping meant, because, you know, it's different language. And, you know, we don't talk about that stuff. I was like, oh, I've done that too. Like, I have to Google how to build a meeting in Teams, you know, like you self-teach. And I think often we're so almost ashamed to talk about that, or to acknowledge the fact that there's stuff we don't know. But actually, we're all in that boat. And so by calling it out and having those conversations, I think that's a cool thing. So that's just a couple. And then I'm sure you'll ask me some more questions, Sig, to drill down.
I totally agree. And I was just going to say, especially you're in the thick of when your small humans are starting to assert their independence, and so easy to just like, you know, to deal with it, you know, when they were like eating, sleeping, pooping, you know, sometimes you can like stick a boob in them if you're breastfeeding and it's all good. But otherwise now there's a lot of no that happens, and managing small humans as well as managing bigger humans in work can be challenging on both fronts. So my kids are now 9 and 6.5, and Dr. Google was my friend for a very long time, and probably still is, because it's just kind of new challenges that you come across as well. But thank you for sharing that, Jordy, as well. And I totally agree with the overwhelm that comes with it, especially as you've mentioned, technology changes so fast, and the language and the tools, and, you know, even just some of the concepts about how we're working, the way we're working. And if anything, like the last couple of years in the pandemic have shown us, it already like changed our world in the way we lived and worked anyway. So for those of us who may have taken a career break pre-pandemic and are coming back to this new, I don't know if we're post-pandemic yet, but new way of working, it can feel even more, I guess, challenging to think about how we're going to step back into that life again. And so just based on that, you know, when we're talking about, I guess, you know, identity particularly, as we have that break, and for all the different reasons that, you know, you took a break, but I think the biggest one personally for me was when I did have children, and the identity shift that happened when I realized what my values were and what actually success looked like to me, and then how that affected and influenced my career pathway as I, you know, made the choice to kind of return back into paid employment as well. And I know you're a very values-based person as well. So I'd love to hear from you then, Jordy, is, you know, particularly when you had children, but I mean, you can talk about your range of experiences, and I know burnout and miscarriage and even travel can change our perspective on life in so many different ways. But I'd love to hear from you how you navigated that shift in identity from the person who you were when you had that break, and the person that you had to kind of step into when you were thinking about returning to work. Was there a difference, or were you the same person? Like, how did you navigate those maybe shift in values, or the shift in what you were looking for, particularly in a job as well?
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you. Well, I guess it comes back to, again, the fact that I'm I'm a human. So I don't live my life in compartments. I don't rock up to work and stop thinking or stop being a mum or stop being a wife. You know, those things still exist and still occur and bleed into my work. And likewise, I don't shut my brain off when I go home. In fact, I went to business school about 10 years ago, and which every time I say 10 years ago, I just sort of have this moment of, oh my gosh, when did I get so old? Anyway, never mind the fact that I've been working for 20 years, even that's rather overwhelming. But I learned from a professor at business school 10 years ago. He used to always say that you do your best strategy on the toilet at 5 a.m. Now, I don't know that that's quite my thing, but the point is, you know, you never really shut your brain off. So this morning at 3 a.m, I woke up for lots of reasons, including the fact that I'm still breastfeeding and have breastfeeding hormones coursing through my body. And, you know, I was actually thinking about some stuff that I'm really excited about at work. So the point I'm making is you don't compartmentalize, it bleeds. So I think the first part is being kind to myself and accepting that and not judging it, because I think personally, my own experience, and certainly when I speak to others around me, we sort of, our go-to sometimes is to judge ourselves for how we think we should be feeling or how we think we should be being, how we think we should be operating. So that's first and foremost, and that's certainly how I approached my return. In terms of some of the other aspects, I'm just going to pause here and just catch my mind. Do you want to give me just some prompt points there, Sig, and then I can just think a bit more? I'm getting lost in my own, weeds of my thoughts.
Yeah. So I think, you know, really where I'm coming from here is, and that question's actually just come up from one of the participants that are here as well, is reconnecting with, I guess, your worth when you and your identity as you had that career break. And so understanding how you rediscovered or were able to re-articulate your own self-worth, particularly as you moved back into paid employment. But like, as you said, it's always been there in a way. And I know one of the things that you were talking to me about just before the call, and I'd love to maybe explore this now, is that concept of value, but that concept of value exchange. So, you know, when you were talking about your own identity and self-worth, but then as you start to navigate back into this professional identity or this new work that you're doing, paid employment, how does that then fit in? So maybe that might help you there.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Well, first and foremost, the worth thing spilled into every aspect of my life, and personally, it's something that, you know, I wrestle with and have wrestled with a lot over my life, and being clear that, and even in the lead up to today, being clear that what other people think of me, or how many people are on this call, or how many people might find this relevant, is not a direct measure of my worth. Even in the lead up today, I've been thinking about that stuff, to the point where I did an SOS to my mum last night on text and said, Lainey, that's what I call my mum. And, you know, she responded with, in fact, I'll read her text message. And this is true for everybody, not just me, but how good's mum's advice? She said, remember, you are your best asset, you and your honest, authentic, real self. Oh, getting emotional. But that's true. And so I say that, and I don't say it flippantly. I step into that every damn day. I meditate a lot. I do a lot of yoga and meditation in tandem. I do it at work. I sat here just before and took a few moments. I had the privilege of working in corporate health previously, and we really encourage that in corporate settings, in big multinational companies all over the world, that it's okay just to take a few moments to just settle into yourself and to settle into the fact that you're okay and you're pretty damn good as you are. The value thing's an interesting one. And again, I'm going to reference business school here. Value, I've spent a lot of time thinking about who I am and my self-worth and my value, and I do that daily. And I also take those quiet moments, whether I'm on holidays, or those milestone moments like returning to work, or being, as I said, being on holiday or starting a new job. I have a journal, and I just sort of jot down just some reminders of the things that I can mine that I like about myself, or that I appreciate about myself, or that I know is good, inherently good. No surprises, I'm a good chatter. I've got good talk. So I know that. And if I get lost or wobble along the way, I can come back to that as I know I'm a good person. I know I've got a good heart. And one of my skills is I've got good chat. But pausing there, going back to this value thing, Cenitex and me, we're a great example. And we haven't yet really talked about my experience here or the wonderful story that has come out of me getting a job here and returning to work, which I'm sure we will in a moment. But what's been really great as us as an example, so there's this exchange of value that's happening between two parties. I'm party number one, and Cenitex is party number two. Cenitex has something they're looking for in me, and I have something that I'm looking for in Cenitex. And really what we're trying to do between that exchange of value is maximizing the benefits that happen. So what benefits can I bring to Cenitex? And likewise, what benefits can I get from Cenitex in return? And in business school, we talk about sort of maximizing the pie of value. So if you think of value in an apple pie, for example, it's really making sure we can make it as big as possible. I know, delicious with ice cream and blueberries, amazing. But the idea is to make the pie as big as possible so to maximize that exchange of value that happens between those two parties, not just me sitting over here with my little pie trying to make it as big as possible, and Cenitex over here with their little pie trying to make it as big as possible, or I'm trying to steal the pie from Cenitex and Cenitex is trying to steal my pie. It's not like that. It's actually about the fact that here we are, we're both worthy and valuable in our own right. How do we maximize the value so that they get what they need and more, and I get what I'm looking for and more? And that has happened and is happening, which I'm sure you're about to ask me about next.
It's a great segue, so thank you for that.
It's like we rehearsed it, but we didn't.
Exactly. This is all planned. No, it wasn't. But I love the concept of pie, and not just because it's delicious, but I love the fact that you talk about the value exchange and no surprise, as you being as people-centered as you are, to really thinking about how you can maximize the benefit for both parties. And I think it's a really good kind of mindset and tip for any of the women who are thinking about returning to work is, one, really knowing the value that you're bringing to the table, but then knowing that it's a conversation with the other party to maximize the benefit for both of you. And so then I'm going to go back to now asking you about your journey with Cenitex, because you have a really interesting story about how you got started with Cenitex, which I think is a little bit unusual, and I think really speaks to the values that Cenitex actually has as an organization to invest in their people as well. So I'd love to hear it in your own words, because from what I know, you were hired when you were 5 months pregnant. And for a lot of us, we can't even imagine doing that. Like there's all these thoughts that come into our head. It's like, I'm not going to try, or because I'm about to go on maternity leave, or, are they going to actually invest in me because I'm about to go on maternity leave? And so, and I say this because, in my own experience, I used to work for Big Four consulting, and there was a point in my life where I had a choice of going for promotion, looking for a job with a little bit more work-life balance, or taking the time to start a family, essentially. And you can clearly know what choice I made, where I realized that I never wanted work to get in the way of my life. But I still went for the promotion in there, but I didn't get it because they essentially told me, you're about to go on maternity leave, you're not going to be here. And so that experience, and this was like, 15 years ago. So when I say that, I feel old too. This was 15 years ago or so. But I'd love to hear from yours, because clearly things have changed, and I don't know if your experience is an exception, or is this something that Cenitex has also embraced? And so let me hear your story. I'd love to know how you got started at Cenitex.
Okay, so before we do, I just need to confess that in a really almost nerd way, I genuinely love my job, and I genuinely love working for Cenitex. Like, I'm not going to get a tattoo. I'm not going to go quite that far. I'm not sure what our chief marketing officer would say if I got a tattoo. But I love it. And I'm sure that if that's not spilling out of me, then it will, because look, I'm having a physical response to it.
I see that.
yeah, and I think in part it's because of this experience, and then in part it's because we're just doing awesome work and we're working with awesome people, and there's a buzz in that too. So yeah, I rocked up day one, 5-6 months pregnant, I can't remember, with big hoops. So I love wearing different earrings. I toned them down today. They're not quite as big because your lovely briefing note said not to wear anything too big because it might make noise, which is true. So I rock up to work my first day, heavily pregnant, or rotund, let's say, maybe not heavily pregnant, but rotund, noticeably. Mm-hmm. And I meet my boss's EA for the first time, and you would think she would point to the obvious and talk about my stomach. And the first thing she said to me was, "Oh my gosh, you've got enormous earrings. They're amazing." It's like, yes, love this place already. So there's some cool stuff that happened either side of me of day one, but I'm just going to talk about day one and those first few weeks and months, few months before I went off on parental leave. But there was something really cool about being pregnant. I sort of didn't necessarily point it out, and I sort of like the perversity of there being something a bit weird in the room and watching what people do. I'm in the business of literal elephant, like my little mini elephant inside of me. And I'm in the business of behavioral psychology. So that's what I do for a job. So it's really interesting watching people's responses. But what I found was me being pregnant opened extraordinary doors to conversations that I wouldn't have had that quickly, I don't think. And I mean, part of my job is I have to build rapport, or I don't have to, I choose to build rapport and trust with people quite quickly, because that's just the nature of experience and the work that I do. But being pregnant was really interesting because, straight away I was talking to people, men, women of different ages, and instantly they wanted to tell me about their children or their grandkids or their nieces or their nephews or their friends' kids and how old they were, and I learnt their names. And our CEO Frances, she's got grandkids the same age as mine, so her daughter was pregnant at the same time that I was. And so can you imagine having a conversation quite literally with our CEO that on the one hand is about commercial strategy and our experience and what are we doing and where are we going as an organization. Oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant, and we're comparing pregnancy notes and what's your daughter eating and what's she not eating, and how's your snotty grandkid going because it's that time and everyone's sick in childcare. And I would have conversations like that every day with people right across our organization, men and women. And women would stop me in the toilet, women I didn't even know, and would say, "Wow, this is I don't know you, but you're pregnant, and this is pretty extraordinary that you're here right now, because obviously you're not going to be here for much longer. You're going to go and have a baby at some point." And so I think what's cool about that is women can be pregnant and their brains don't stop. You don't stop having experience or work experience, or you're not capable. And I mean, the same is true for women who are going through menopause or people who have got personal experiences going on. It's not just pregnancy. The point is we still are valuable and worthy in and of ourselves, regardless of how rotund one's stomach is. But just some other couple of things either side, just I guess to celebrate Cenitex and also to show what's possible, is when I went for the role at Cenitex, it was a permanent full-time position, and I actually wasn't looking. I was pregnant, so I was like, well, I was consulting and I was wrapping up my own business, and I was happy to kind of go and nest, I guess. My son was 1 at the time, so my priorities were there. But because I love what I do, I saw this job. I'd wanted to work in state government for a while. I've got experience in technology. So I was like, sweet, I'll just throw my hat in the ring, see what happens. Yeah. And for me, interviewing is like dating. You're not marrying someone on the spot. It's you're really just having a drink to see if you want to have another drink or see if you want to have dinner. And it's as much about me in that moment trying Cenitex on for size as it is about them looking at me. And when I went for the interview, I wasn't noticeably pregnant. So we didn't have to have that conversation straight away. It was just a case of, do we like each other? Yep. I just didn't expect them to offer me the job straight away. So that's when that conversation got interesting. And so we were able, because we could have the conversation and because I was upfront and because I asked questions, we were able to take a permanent full-time role, make it a part-time role with parental leave. And then here I am 2.5 years later. I was very prepared, and I said this to Cenitex at the time, I'm happy to just do a 3-month contract. Just get me in, do what you need, and I'll get out. And they're like, no, this is Victorian government. We celebrate humans of all walks of life. And so I had really great discussions with our executive director of performance and capability, of my boss, who's executive director as well, who are really like, no, this is a wonderful thing. We're about hiring the right talent and the people with the right talent, regardless of your circumstance.
Oh, amazing. And that just absolutely makes my heart sing as well. And so I congratulate for that, for finding a place that celebrates you, because I think that's, what we want, particularly when, when we are feeling our self-worth might have felt a little bit battered from whatever it was, for the reasons we might have left paid employment, and coming back to that and finding organizations that do really walk the talk when it comes to inclusion, belonging, and celebrating people, like you said as well.
Right.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop there for a second, Jordy, and we've had quite a few questions come through as well. So I'm just going to go to the chat and the questions, and some of them you may have answered already, but I'd love to ask you a couple of the ones that have come through. And so Roxana has asked, particularly now that we've just talked about how you moved into your current role with Cenitex, she'd like to know, did you come back softly each time? So was it 1 day per week for a month, and then the next month 2 days, following 3 days? Did you, and obviously you've mentioned you didn't come back full time, you're part-time, but did you have more of a transition period, or were you sort of 3 days straight off? Or that negotiation that you had done before, was that your entry point?
I love these questions because I can't remember. So I have to just, baby brain's a thing. There's lots of sleepless nights since then. But so a few things here. I didn't come back 12 months. Both of my children have a health condition. And so where they're permanent patients of the Children's Hospital. Probably too much information for this call, but I'm a human and I'm raising humans. So that's an important part of our story. And so my daughter had some complexities. So I think I ended up returning just before she was around the time she was 1, because I wanted to make sure that I was really comfortable with her health and where she was. And she's thriving. She's just a wonderful little bean of energy. So I think I pushed out my return. That's part 1. And my boss was really cool with that. And in fact, I think you have an option of extending for another 12 months, even if you want to here. That wasn't right for me because I love what I do, I wanted to come back. So what I'd negotiated with Cenitex is that I work a 3-day week. And I do work a 3-day week, as in when I work those 3 days, I'm not working 5 in 3. I legitimately am working 3 and consistently am doing so. So that's what I'd negotiated prior to going on leave, and certainly how I'm contracted now. So I think I maybe worked 1 or 2 days for the first just couple of weeks, just particularly my hormones too, just to really see how they would go. We must talk about the magical room here at Cenitex, where there's a special room where you can go and breastfeed or pump. And it's like if you're into Harry Potter, it's like the room of requirement. Like you get your own special security pass, which means you can get your boobs out and no one knows, like no one can come in and see you.
Although we'll come back to the boobs.
I know, it's awesome. Anyway, and remind me to tell you about how one day I forgot to put the blinds down. Funny moment. Of course, it's me. That would happen to me. See, I do this. I'll lose my train of thought. Okay, so I think I started working 1 or 2, and then I got straight into 3, and I've been working 3 days fairly consistently. However, coming back to that exchange of value thing, it's not hard and fast. So I have a great agreement with my boss and with the business that, the work I do in particular, sometimes it really scales. And so sometimes I need to work 4 or 5 days, but that's a choice. And I'm paid for that. And I have a great agreement with my childcare and a great agreement here that I'll just scale things up or down as I need to. And my boss, God love him, it means I complete a timesheet and he has to, can you imagine an executive director signing off a timesheet every time? But he does it. And he's committed to doing it for the next 12 months because it gets the best out of me and it gets the best outcomes for the business. So it's flexible. So the long answer, but the short answer is, I think I did a couple of weeks of 2 days. I'm now officially on a 3-day contract. And that's what I do. And then I scale up or down accordingly.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
How's the detail. Is this too much? Like,
No,
I'm not used to talking about myself like this.
No, I love it. And I get the benefit of hearing this because I find it fascinating as well, because these are the conversations that we don't have, like the real kind of logistical details around how did you do it? How did it work? What was it like? You know, those kind of things. And I do appreciate you mentioning some of the challenges that you've had, especially as your kids, you know, with their health challenges, which is again part of the human experience that we all bring. Like, we don't leave that part of us behind as we come into work, no matter what is happening. And you know, we have so many different challenges, and so having the ability to share that with your work and have them respond in a way that allows you to thrive, I think it's something really special. So and I do appreciate you sharing that too.
Can I just jump in there for a minute? Just because it's come into my mind, and I try not to be in the business of giving advice, but what has worked for me is asking questions and being almost unapologetic in asking those questions, because the world's not going to stop if you ask a question. So I ask that I can work part-time and flex up or down. Sorry about that horrible sound outside. Flex up or down if I want to. Now, I can only do that because I asked that question and I wasn't afraid to ask that question. The world didn't stop. Victorian government didn't break down. Technologies didn't stop being delivered to, you know, it's okay to ask the question. And sometimes it's going to be met with a no. Sometimes it'll be met with a yes. And sometimes it'll be met with, well, let's try and work out something that works for both of us. And that's, I mean, this is about returning to work in all walks of life, but I've also likewise asked that question of childcare. So we just have an agreement now that I can up or, you know, scale up or down if I need to within their own confines too. So the point I'm making is always ask. I've got someone, you know, I work with people who are constantly asking me, and again, it's the same rule applies. Well, let's try and work out how we maximize value for Cenitex and for the person so that we get the best for everyone.
Love it. And that reminds me, I think, yeah, part of the Emerging Leaders program that we run, we had a senior female leader come in and from Google actually, and one of the things that she talked about was the advice was, if you don't ask, it's already a no, right? And so the concept of asking, it could be a no, but it could be a yes, or it could be, let's talk more about what can actually work for both of us too. So I think that's fantastic to, you know, to help us think about, you know, what are the things that we want, and actually hopefully have a bit of courage to actually ask that too. So amazing. All right, so we've got lots of questions coming in, so I want to make sure that we get through to all of them. So Stella has asked, oh, it's a big question. So
of course it is.
So this question is, so she talks about the concept of seasons, and you're probably familiar with that when we think about life and career as seasons are there. But she has said that some people aspire to leave a legacy. So what do you think of the idea of destiny and its links to our identity? So like just laying on you Wednesday morning.
I think I know Stella, so thank you very much for your question. Great question too. I try not so much to think about legacy, because for myself, and I think, you know, we're all humans and we're all unique in our own right, so we're all going to think about and approach this differently. I think less about legacy because I just want to get in there and at work and get stuff done and do a good job and promote goodwill. That's really what I'm here for, to really promote goodwill. And in financial terms, goodwill is actually, you can quantify that on a financial statement and actually put dollars against it. So it's a meaningful and valuable thing, other than just making us feel good. But I do believe, I talked before about the fact that I do meditate and do a lot of yoga and spend a lot of time I create space for myself to think at work and think at home and think about this stuff. And I really do believe, whether it's, you know, no matter what your faith or religion is, that the universe does play a role in things. And I'm going to quote my mum. My mum has this great thing. God, I will have to get her a recording. Hi, Mum. She talks about this red light, green light thing a lot in life. That, you know, if you're getting yeses or doors are opening for you or something's happening, then that's a green light. And that at that green light, just like you would at a traffic light, you have a choice around what you do with that green light, whether you go straight, whether you pause, although you might get some beeping, but it's still a choice, whether you go right or left. And with a red light, if, for example, if you get a no, like if in a job interview or you ask a question and it's a no, it's not a rejection, it's just red, which means it's just not right for now. And in that philosophical or destiny sense, I think that's also timing. I think timing plays into that it's not that time for you now. And likewise, here I am at Cenitex, not the place I thought I would be. I often have people who I used to work at Virgin, and I have some people from my old team who say, oh, we really thought you'd do something glamorous next because my background's in fashion. And you know, that's their value judgment on that. And they're like, and you're in Victorian government. And I couldn't be happier, as I've said. Whilst it may not be glamorous to some people, it's such extraordinary work, and I wouldn't have planned this. So there's certainly a destiny element of me being here at the right time and the right doors or the right green lights happening at the same time for me to be here. So yeah, I think often we get too in our heads, which, again, my own lived experience, when I try and control things with my head and try and plan out this perfect thing, invariably it's imperfect and a fail, however you measure that. Whereas I think there's an element of accepting and trusting yourself and trusting what's around you and celebrating that in the moment. So in short, yes, I believe in destiny, and I think it plays.
Yeah.
How's that?
No, amazing. I love it. And that's really wise. Like, I'm mentally taking notes because, I think I love the concepts of green lights and red lights, and I think part of it's having enough self-awareness to understand whether it is a green light or red light and make choices, like you said as well. But also the concept of timing and surrendering, which can be a little hard because it requires a lot of trust as well in the uncertainty and the unknown as well. And I think that links really beautifully to what you said about understanding your own self-worth and knowing the value that you bring to whatever it is.
Not underestimating the power of stepping into that vulnerability. It's bloody hard. It was hard for me to rock. Wonderful, but it's also hard for me to rock up today and talk about myself, because what if people aren't interested, or what if it doesn't resonate, or what if they think poorly of me? And I think there's a few things there. One, it's none of my business what people think unless they tell me. But two, Brené Brown, if for those of you who might not be familiar with her work, Google her. She's got 59 million views for her TED Talk. Her whole, well, not all her work, but a lot of her work is around vulnerability, both in the workplace and personally. And I think, yeah, there's a lot in that, stepping into your vulnerability, learning in it, struggling through it, because coming out, look at me, I've embraced so much bloody vulnerability in the last few years. And I'm, I don't really think about success, but if you measure success on how happy I am, I'm pretty bloody happy.
Nice, thank you. Amazing. Perfect. So I'm going to go back to a couple of the other questions that have come through, and then we've only got 15 minutes left, Jordy. So I did want to, I love that we're chatting for ages. And I did want to come back to the bigger question that we had when we were starting, was around, I think you've talked about it as part of what we've had already, but just some of the myths, particularly that you have heard about returning to work and how you've actually been able to bust some of them. And I think you've already mentioned some, but I want to come back to that question. But I'm going to go back to some of the questions that have come through in the chat there. So this is a great one that I think will be really relevant to a lot of the women that are looking to return to work. And it's a topic we're going to explore further through the SheReturns platform as well. But T. Etherington, lovely T, has asked, I'd love to know whether you have transitioned into a new career path at any point when returning to work. So did you pivot industries, roles? And how did you position your transferable skills to new employers when you may not have had direct experience in a field? So I think particularly pertinent to when we're thinking about Cenitex as a tech company or working in the tech industry, for women that might be looking to move into the tech industry, not necessarily technical roles, but within that kind of tech industry, when potentially they haven't worked there before. But in your experience, how did you position your transferable skills to your new employers when you may not have had that direct experience?
Yeah, great. So I've pivoted, just as a quick high level, from retail into marketing, into advertising, client service, back into marketing, across to customer experience. And I've done it through a lot of sectors: retail, fashion, government, local government, my own consulting business that I ran for a number of years, and corporate health and tech and startup. So there you go. There's a good mishmash. All skills are transferable, even the ones that you have at home. I think what's helped me is at different times I've had coaches, like executive coaches or career coaches, both paid and voluntary. So I would recommend that's a great space to be able to say, these are my skills, how do we work out how to transfer them? I don't need to do that so much now because I'm a bit more practiced at it and I can just kind of pivot those skills. And in the absence of not being able to fund that or find that, using some peers around you or some people that you trust where you can have those conversations where they can call BS on you too, to say, nah, you can't, like the fact that you can cook in the kitchen doesn't necessarily mean that you can, I don't know, create a workshop at work. Bad example. But the point I'm making is there's some skills that just, but never underestimate the skills that we have. That's kind of where I kind of rest on, and to write stuff down, that's really helpful, but also talking it through with one or two people that you really trust, who know their stuff, that you trust their experience. That's where I've had the most success. That coaching space in particular really was very formative for me.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you talk about coaching, because it's something, I'm a certified organizational coach, so I'm always banging on about the importance of coaching, particularly for women and for those stepping into leadership too. I think it's amazing and really valuable. So I love the advice you've given there, as well as writing things down and having people around you that will actually be able to look at it a little bit more objectively and support you with some of those transferable skills. And I love the fact that you also said that, even those home skills are transferable, because I mean, if we think about ourselves at home or as parents, potentially we do conflict management if you've got more than one child, or even with yourself, negotiation, project management, think about all those types of skills that you have when you're dealing with small humans, other facets of life as well. So there is so much that you can apply into future roles there as well. So thank you for that. So the other question that Ash has asked is, when you return to work, what was the same and what was different at work for you? And maybe this is where we can weave in the room of requirement potentially.
Awesome. Well, my body's not the same. It's still changing. I think after COVID, all of our bodies are changing. The hormone levels, and I'm going to reference people we all have hormones, women in particular, whatever stage of life you're in, postpartum, pre-children, not children, menopause, all of those things have an impact, and they're invisible to many people, but they really do impact. So for example, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, don't get me to talk about data or strategy because I'm cactus, but get me to do it at 9:30 in the morning and let's do it. What else has changed? Technology I talked about before. It's those little micro changes that we take for granted. I use a lot of Microsoft PowerPoint, and that the interface can often change there, or the user experience. And so that small stuff, again, which we take for granted, can be quite daunting. I've done it a few times now, so I'm used to it. I'm just used to being like a Luddite. And I talk about that because I think we should. It's good to laugh at it. But other things change too. Someone mentioned before the seasons of an organization change. And so, when you're returning to an organization, you're starting an organization fresh, that there might be change or transformation in play, or at a different culture, the culture might be in an interesting point. So, there's lots of changes that happen. For me, the big one's been sleep. And the other big one that I think we talk about a little bit, but not enough, is this role of technology in our worlds, and the fact that we're so hybrid now, and the fact that it's almost like we've become always on, and that drives me nuts. And it's really impacted my sleep. And I talk about that a lot with my peers. In fact, I pulled a male peer aside the other day to say, how is he coping with that? Because he and I seem to be on a lot of calls, and we've talked about a few strategies. One is, do we need to be in every meeting? And pull a Priya Parker. Again, if you don't know who Priya Parker is, Google her, she's wonderful, but she really talks about purposeful gatherings. So if you don't have an agenda in your meeting and I don't know why I'm going, then why should I go? Carving out more of that time to do the quiet thinking and the quiet work. Room of requirement, really quickly, we have this magical room here called the wellness room. Own security pass, you go in, you can, for someone like me, breastfeed or express. Other people might be tired, they might need a rest, or they might just need to do some basic yoga stretches. There's amazing facilities inside. There's a TV, there's a basic kitchen requirements, hot water, so per PowerPoint, which is great because I used to bring my pup. But there's also a gorgeous window with gorgeous views outside. So if you've got your boobs out like I did, and you forget to pull the blinds down, yeah, hello, people over in the other office. What a great look. Note to self. Well, I might reach out to HR and make sure we put that in the induction briefing for new starters.
Yeah, you know,
but we have wonderful things like prayer rooms and bathing facilities for people who want to pray and need to bathe beforehand. We have sparkling water on our taps. Like, that's something that's changed that I never would have thought about before. All of that stuff's great.
Yeah,
wonderful.
I love it. And I'm just thinking that, you know what, it's like, maybe that's like a little bit of a hint to the other office. It's like, hey, if you don't have a room of requirement where you can show your boobs, maybe you should get one too, because look how amazing this is, potentially.
And just, sorry, just one other thing. Look at the sunshine on my face. I'm looking a bit like Mary, Mother Mary. One other thing I was going to say is a lot of new buildings like the one we are in the city has end of trip facilities, which is this weird and fancy term of saying there's a change room for you with showers. And in our case, we have a towel service. So, you know, life's pretty big and there's a lot of things that I try and pack into my life. One of them is my morning run, and more often than not, I'm rocking up to work sweaty in my gym gear. I can have a quick shower here and then just come up to work. I couldn't have done that a few years ago. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing. I love the little touches that do make work experience, or the experience at work, just so much more fulfilling as well, because they're the little things that kind of, then you can just get on with your day, and then you can actually just, you know, bring your best to that. So and also the consideration of the people within the office are not just employees, they're people with very rich and varied lives, whether it's exercise or, you know, pumping or breastfeeding or prayer, or even just having a rest and wanting quiet. Like, I love that as well. So
we have a quiet room here. And you're not, in fact, I said to someone the other day, we should have a meeting, and they're like, no, not allowed. It's for quiet time only. And I think that's wonderful that there's discipline and that's preserved for that. And so it should be for quiet time.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that also, I think that's something that we can really learn from Cenitex too. Given that we've only got a couple of minutes left, I really want to make sure that we do cover some of the myths around returning to work. So, you know, for those that, if I didn't get to your question today, don't worry. Please feel free to ask the question in the SheReturns platform as well. If I can't answer it, I'll reach out to Jordy. I'll see if she can jump onto the platform and maybe answer some of those as well. But we'll continue the conversation with Jordy after the event too. But this is a question that I really wanted to come to, because I think that, like, as we were talking about value, self-worth, identity, all of the things that we're struggling with, and that adds to this overwhelm that we might be feeling as we consider returning to work, is some of the myths that you have seen out there about returning to work. And then in your experience, have you seen where they've not been correct? Have you been able to bust some of those myths as well? So just, you know, if you want to share a couple of them that in your experience that you've heard, and how you've been able to kind of prove them wrong.
Okay, well, you can't get a new job when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Well, I did that. You can't be a leader and work part-time. Well, I do that too. So I am a leader. I was with our executives yesterday, and I'm presenting to our board next week. And I'm part of the senior leadership team in our organisation, and I work part-time. You can't have little kids and be a female and be a leader and work part-time. Well, I'm doing all of those things. That government, people who work for government are lazy and boring, and that government more broadly is boring. And sometimes the adage of brown cardigan gets thrown around. Well, look at me. Here I am, 2.5 years in. I have a physical response to how enthusiastic I am about being here and the wonderful work that both Cenitex and Victorian government are doing in the digital space, in the future-proofing of Victoria space. It's an exciting, really genuinely exciting time to be here. How's that? There's a few myths.
Yeah, nice. I would also love to hear then from a myths perspective as well is, you know, the one that I think I get here, or the one that I hear a lot, I would say is, you know, I'm too old, or the one that, you know, my skills aren't relevant. And I know we've touched on it a little bit, you know, previously in our chat today as well. But the fact that when, especially if you've had a long career break, that the factor or the concept of relevance that comes up, am I still relevant to today's workforce or today's employment? Is that something that you've experienced or come across? And would you have any tips or advice on how to reframe that myth?
I think age, like anything, gender, whatever it is a barrier if you let it be. I mean, one of my closest colleagues here is 60 plus, and she's extraordinary. She does great work in this organisation, and she's part of our leadership team, and she does really wonderful work. So just as she is no more capable or less capable because of her age. It's got nothing to do with it. It's about her lived and worked experience and what she brings to the table. Likewise with me, I'm 40. To some people that's ancient, and to some people that's infancy. I don't even think about age. I just really think about the experience and the opportunity, and you know, yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, I think it is. And I think that's just what it, you know, like age is just a number, right? And it's perspective. Right. Yeah, so I think it's comes back to some of the topics that we talked about around being really clear on our value, or the value exchange in that sense. Right. You know, really working and being really confident in ourselves and our self-worth, paying attention to those red lights and green lights, which I think you've articulated beautifully as well. So I'm going to, you know, I'm going to wrap up here as well. And just a reminder to everyone that, you know, if you are interested in roles at Cenitex, we'll pop the link into the chat, but please do join our SheReturns. It's a free platform, and there is a link, a direct link that you can access to put in expressions of interest for roles there at Cenitex as well. So they're definitely looking for people. And as you can hear, it sounds like a pretty wonderful place to work, even if it's just for that magical room of requirement. That sounds amazing.
It's pretty good. And look at me, I'm currently working on my tan as the sun streams in through the window.
There we go.
You can even, if you want to work on your tan, come on down.
Amazing. I just want to thank you again, Jordy, so much for this chat. I feel like we could have just talked for another hour, and there's so much I would have loved to dive in deeper, but you know, we've only got an hour here too. But like, I appreciate you sharing so honestly and vulnerably as well, and it's just testament to the kind of person and leader that you are. So I really do appreciate you coming and sharing your experiences with us here this morning as well. And for everyone else that is here on this webinar, you know, we will be running some of these live events more regularly. So the next one coming up in August, we're going to take the conversation that Jordy started here around transferable skills, around coaching in particular as well. And we're going to be speaking to General Assembly about some of those things too, which I think is going to be a really fun one as well. So please make sure that if you are in the SheReturns platform, you RSVP. We'll pop the information soon, and you RSVP to that as well. Thank you so much, Jordy. I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sig. Take care. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.